Thanks for tuning in to the channel. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Right now, my buddy Pat and I are on a post-work adventure near the house at about 3,000 feet. And we're working our way into a lost lake. And we're targeting cutthroat and rainbow trout. And this is part of my Catch-to-Carve series, which if you're new, this is where I'm gonna actually target one species of fish each episode. And then I'm gonna carve a replica based on the largest one we catch. So that's kind of the goal, at least. Basically, it's any species that you can target with a fly rod in Washington State. So this one here, we're gonna start off with, hopefully, nice rainbow trout. So follow along. Had to bust in here, and now we are at the lake, and it is gorgeous. And I am targeting rainbow and cutthroat, so we'll see which one wants to chase my fly. Take a look. So I don't truly have a great way to document this thing yet. So what I'm gonna do is this beautiful little guy. I'm just gonna get a reference shot here from my net hoop, and I'll use that as my gauge later on. Pretty stoked right now. That was the first official fish of the Catch-to-Carve series, and I am stoked. It was a beautiful little trout, so when my wife sees this, she's gonna be very upset, Pat. What is that? That's a victory cigar. First Catch-to-Carve, first fish is in the net, and then away and healthy and happy. So that concludes the adventure part of our trip here. Now it's time to head into the shop and carve a replica of that fish that I caught that you saw there on camera. So we're gonna make the hike out here and get out before dark, and I'm gonna hop in the shop. So see you there. So I figure I'm starting a new series, the Catch-to-Carve series, and I better start off with a bang. So I decided to make a new shop. Well, same shop, different backdrop, new shop scene, so I can actually work efficiently here instead of making what you probably have seen were piles of tools in the background. Every shop had its designated pile, and that got old, and basically I spent half my time just looking for tools I needed. Yeah, so here I am, about ready to start my new series, the Catch-to-Carve series. And Catch-to-Carve, as I threw it out there on the trail, is where I target a new species of fish in each video in Washington State with a fly rod. I take you along for the journey, and if I catch it on a very strange fly, I'll show you how to actually tie that fly. And then I take reference shots of it after catching whatever size fish. It doesn't have to be a trophy, it doesn't have to be a monster, just a beautiful fish I'm targeting. And then I'll come back to the shop, draw up a pattern, and which I'm about to do right now, and then carve that fish as close as I can to the original fish I caught and released. Sounds easy. So you've been seeing me actually making a pattern of a fish I caught. Well, that's a 13.5-inch fish, and I would be doing myself a huge disservice if I didn't go ahead and actually get as accurate as possible by doing a few ratio calculations. Ratios are math, and I suck at math, but it's worth noting that this, if you want to do realistic lifelike carvings, it's good to have your proportions just right. So that is taking something like you saw on my iPhone and putting on, say, an iPad, where I can set the length at, say, 8 inches or 6 inches, and then create ratios off of that by doing a simple calculation, which is right here. Now with that calculation, I can go from the tip of the snout to the end of the gill plate, figure out exactly in real world how it translates to a 13.5-inch fish. As long as this image stays the same, I should be in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple ratios and see how close I was with my reference drawing that I just eyeballed. Sadly, I got rid of some of the shoulders of the fish. So some of that size that we fishermen love to embellish, you can't hide from ratios in photos. It's a thing. That said, I'm still working through some of the details. As you saw, I nailed it on from the tip of the jaw to the gill plate, from the tip of the jaw to the dorsal, front of the dorsal fin. Things are looking pretty good. I'm really happy with it. There's little tweaks that I have to make to get this thing just dialed in. It is late in the shop, but I want to make some progress on my carving, so here we are. So, today, I got my fish. My fish is looking pretty good. It is time to start detailing the head because, well, I got the eyeballs on order, and I'll show you those shortly. And I also will sand the body later with some texturing, and then we'll get into scale details. But right now, I want to define that head because, well, that's pretty rad. So, I'm going to do that with my Dremel 9001. It is a rotary tool. But that said, let's hop into detailing the head of this. After a late night in the shop, I have basically got a detailed fish. Well, the head at least. So head details are looking pretty good. Nice and even. Everything lines up beautifully. Eyes are drilled. Now it's time to sand, and also sand the body, and then on to scale details. That takes a while. And I got a tiny little scaling tip, which I'll put a link in the description to the Coalwood wood burner and scaling tip that I'm using. It is a 1/8 inch, so it will take me a very long time to do. That said, devil's in the details, so let's get to it. Lovely. You know what? Can never be safe enough. I got my dust collector going. That's like inside this downdraft table, and I still wear a PPE. I don't want a sinus infection. They really suck. Don't just wear it. We're looking pretty good. Nice and smooth, 180 grit finish on most of it. I'm gonna go do the head. Now I'm on to the dorsal fin and this little fin back here. And then I'll lay out some fin positioning stuff so I can actually drill some holes for that. But basically, I'm gonna look at my reference photo, kind of gauge it as best I can, and add some detail and actually use the Dremel again to carve out my fins and then hand sand around those. So that's next. Oh, and the tail I might save for after the scales because I just want to get scales going. They'll take forever. So it's on to fish scaling. This is the part that can take a while. So I have my cold wood burner right here. New tip. This is a 1/8 inch fish scale tip. I'll put a link in the description to what I got going here. And now, a little time lapse. That was a lot of scale details. I fired up the Coldwood detailer and set it to the 5 setting, which is halfway through it, so it's not just blazing them in there. And when I lay on these scales, they go on pretty nice. So as you can see, that is a ton of scales. If you have done this before, you know that's a lot of work. Oh, and I'm gonna actually do the fins. Since this material, this basswood has been hanging out in my shop for a day like today, for like 3 years now. This material is super dry, like beyond dry. I've never worked with something so dry to the point of where it's like punky and kind of fluffy. You probably have seen that in this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually grab some alder and use that. It's a denser material, not too hard, but it's easier to carve. I'm actually gonna make the fins out of that. So we'll run over to the bandsaw, make some fins. It's time to stop kicking the can down the road and actually bust out these fins. So I got the alder fins on the bottom, I got the tail and the dorsal in place. I'm gonna go ahead and add some life to those by actually adding the details. So the details consist of using the Dremel tool to define larger, parts of the actual fin based on my reference photos and, what a fin actually looks like. And I can burn in details as well. And it's not every day in my household that a shipment of eyeballs shows up. It's probably not normal for any household, but there they are. These are various sizes of Wayne Cooper trout eyeballs from Van Dyke's Taxidermy. They're soft, little flexible things, but they look super nice. And yeah, you just kind of grind them, mold them into shape. All right, so I got it all glued in. Now it's time to take a last little nugget of putty here and see if I can't make a nice eyelid. Well, not eyelid, but eye surround area. I'm gonna take it inside, let it dry overnight. Then I will be back to sand and then seal this thing up and get ready for paint. It is hot. I mean, like hot in the northwest sense. It's like 85 degrees and we're all kind of dying up here. But I've got my airbrush set up here. It is the Grizzly 225 930 airbrush. I worked at Grizzly about 2.5 years before I even knew that we actually carried airbrushes. And it's a pretty darn good airbrush. So I picked one up and man, I mean, it can hammer or paint. I'm going to start by looking at my reference photos, and I'm going to start with some base coats. So let's get to it. For my next trick, yellow oxide. This is the part where things can go sideways real quick. Iridescent bronze fine. It's starting to look like a brown trout. Some weird spots, but layers. All right, so I jumped ahead just to see what the spots would look like, and boom, they're looking pretty sweet. Check that out. Spot pattern on what I consider to be the A side of the fish is looking good. Now, time to do the back. All I'm using for that is just basic little acrylic craft paint. This is just a black acrylic. Then I will touch up the belly here in a little while. Once I get the mount system made, so how it's going to sit on the wall. Once I get that done, then I can actually go back in and have it sitting up where I can actually access it. And I will hit the belly with some proper coloring and tip the scales, and we're done. I had a clean shop, and then this project just jumped into my lap. Anyways, my fish is right here. My fish needs a mount, something to go on the wall. It needs a little finish, and it'll be done. I'm gonna go ahead and make the mount for it. It's a very special mount, something I'm pretty stoked on. It's gonna involve lily pads, because where I caught this fish, as you saw, was in the lily pads, or around them. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some steel lily pads, and let's do that now. I have this basic hand wheel that's kind of acting as, you know, a relief for moving the steel in the directions I want. So I'm gonna bend it around the wheel and then just kind of cut and tack as I need to on the lily pads I cut out with the grinder. Welding is complete. The lily pad setup is looking really good. I got a nice little brush finish. I might go ahead and put a wire brush on my grinder, do a little bit more polishing to this, but now I actually have a base piece, which that is gonna mount to the wall with that keyhole. That keyhole we'll put a screw into the stud in the wall, sit on that, lock into place. What I have here is actually some hex bolt that has been cut down. So that's actually the threaded end of a hex bolt, then welded onto the rods here, and then cut to length so it won't stick into the wall. Basically, it's ready to go. It's got a nut on there. I'm gonna cinch that sucker down, sand it, finish it, polish it, put a fish on it, and then it's on to finish, which is just going to be some Helmsman clear glossy urethane stuff. So just some really good glossy urethane to cover everything from rusting and the fish to look glossy. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey as I carved this rainbow trout in my first Catch-to-Carve. Now, this is going to be an ongoing series, so I'm going to travel around the state catching fish with the fly rod here in Washington, and I will carve replicas to match those catch and release fish. If you have suggestions for fish in my state that you'd want me to target, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and I appreciate you coming along for the journey. On to the next carving.